It started as a dream. A young couple, fresh-faced and in love, packed up their lives into a white Ford Transit van and set out on an adventure across the country. They called it van life, a journey of freedom, exploration, and endless horizons. They captured every moment, smiling into the camera, sharing their adventures with the world. But what the world didn't see was the darkness lurking beneath those carefully curated videos. Gabby Petito, a 22-year-old aspiring travel blogger, and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, had spent months planning this cross-country trip. Their social media painted the picture of a perfect couple, embracing nature, chasing sunsets, and living out the kind of storybook romance that millions of people dream about. But behind those idyllic snapshots was a reality far more sinister. And soon, the cracks in their picture-perfect world would become too large to ignore. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. At Crime Scene Exposed, we uncover the most chilling real-life mysteries. You won't want to miss what's coming next. August 12, 2021. The dry heat of Moab, Utah, weighed heavy on the desert roads as a white Ford Transit van rolled down the highway. Inside the vehicle sat Gabby and Brian, an ordinary couple at least to anyone who passed them by. But then, something happened. Something alarming enough that a bystander picked up their phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, routine, as they answered the call. But the person on the other end sounded shaken, unsure. 911 operator. 911? What's your emergency? Caller. Yeah, we just drove by, and we saw a guy slapping a girl. 911 operator. You saw a male hit a female? Caller. Yes, they were running up and down the sidewalk. He slapped her. She hit him back, then he grabbed her face or something, and they got in their van and drove off. The police took the report seriously. Within minutes, officers were on the lookout for the van, scanning the roads for any sign of the couple. Then, just ahead, they spotted it moving steadily along the highway. They flipped on their sirens, but the vehicle didn't pull over right away. Instead, it swerved suddenly, veering off course and striking the curb before jerking back into the lane. The officers exchanged glances. This wasn't normal behavior. Something was wrong. As the van finally came to a stop, an officer stepped out, adjusting his body camera as he approached the driver's side. The window rolled down, and there he was, Brian Laundrie. His hands fidgeted slightly, his mouth stretching into an awkward smile as he greeted the officer with a nervous chuckle. Officer, hey, how's it going? Mind stepping out for me? Brian's fingers raked through his short, cropped hair as he nodded quickly, stepping out of the van. He was relaxed, too relaxed, almost as if he was trying to play it cool. But the officers weren't focused on his demeanor. They were looking at the scratches running down the side of his face. Officer, what happened here? Brian let out another breathy chuckle, shaking his head slightly. Brian, oh man, it's just Gabby. She gets worked up sometimes. You know? I love her, I really do, but she's got a lot of anxiety. I was just trying to calm her down, and she I guess she scratched me when she got upset. Nothing crazy. The officer raised an eyebrow. Brian was talking fast, filling the silence with explanations that no one had asked for. But something didn't sit right. The call they had received described a man slapping a woman, not the other way around. Officer, you sure? Because we got a call saying you were the one hitting her. For the first time, Brian hesitated. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he quickly recovered. Brian, oh no, that's not what happened at all. I mean, yeah, we were arguing, and yeah, I was trying to get her to calm down, but I never hit her. She was just really upset, you know? While Brian spoke, another officer was already walking toward the passenger side. Inside, curled up in the seat, was Gabby. Her face was red, tear-streaked. Her hands were gripping the straps of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles were white. The officer gently tapped on the door, and Gabby jumped, startled. Officer, Miss Petito, can you step out for me? Gabby's breath was shaky as she wiped her eyes and climbed out of the van. She was visibly distressed, her body language tense. The officer guided her to a spot away from Brian and crouched down slightly, trying to meet her gaze. "Officer, can you tell me what's going on?" Gabby sniffled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Gabby, we were fighting this morning. I have OCD, and I was just trying to clean the van, and he got really frustrated with me." "Officer, did he hit you?" Gabby's eyes darted downward. She hesitated. "Gabby, not really. I hit him first. I was just trying to get him to stop telling me to calm down. I was trying to push him away, and I scratched him, and..." Her voice broke. She took a deep breath, forcing a small, nervous laugh. "Gabby, I didn't mean to be mean. I was so stressed." The officer studied her face, noting the marks on her arm. "Officer, what about these bruises? Did he do that?" Gabby's response was immediate, too immediate. "Gabby, no, I don't know. I get bruises easily." Her voice wavered. She looked at the officer for just a second too long, as if silently pleading with him to believe her, or perhaps to see past the words she was saying. But before he could press further, she shook her head, forcing another smile. "Gabby, I'm okay. I promise." The officers stepped away, quietly discussing what to do. Legally, Gabby was now considered the primary aggressor, since she admitted to hitting Brian first. But something didn't sit right. The bruises, her panicked demeanor, the way she kept looking over her shoulder. It all pointed to something else. Something darker. They called their supervisor for guidance. After a brief discussion, they decided no arrests would be made. Instead, they would separate the couple for the night, hoping that a little space would help them calm down. Brian was taken to a nearby hotel, while Gabby was left with the van. As the officers prepared to leave, one of them turned to Gabby one last time. "Officer, try to take a deep breath. Okay? You're gonna be fine." Gabby nodded, forcing a small smile, but as the police drove away, leaving her alone in the van, that smile disappeared. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at the empty road ahead. That night, she called her mother. She told her she loved her. She said she and Brian were okay. But in reality, things were about to get much, much worse. But what happened when they reunited the next morning remains a mystery. What we do know is that the road trip continued, but the tone had shifted. The once dreamy adventure had darkened into something else entirely. Gabby and Brian traveled north to Salt Lake City, where they checked into a Fairfield Inn hotel near the airport. Surveillance footage from the lobby captured them together. Brian pacing, looking agitated, Gabby standing close, arms crossed, her face unreadable. A hotel worker later recalled seeing them argue. And then, suddenly, Brian left. On August 17th, Brian flew back home to Florida, alone, leaving Gabby behind in Utah. He told his parents he needed to clear out a storage unit to save money for the trip. But why abandon Gabby? Why leave her alone, only to return days later? Some believe it was a cooling-off period. Others suspect the tension had escalated to something even more dangerous. But when Brian rejoined Gabby in Salt Lake City on August 23rd, something had changed. She was distant, withdrawn, and within days, she would vanish without a trace. On August 25th, Gabby called her mother, Nicole Schmidt, from Grand Teton National Park. It was a normal conversation. Gabby sounded happy, excited about the trip, but it would be the last time Nicole ever heard her daughter's voice. 2 days later, on August 27th, a strange message arrived from Gabby's phone. Gabby's text, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Nicole was immediately alarmed. Stan was Gabby's grandfather, but she never called him that, ever. Something felt off, unnatural. Had Gabby even sent the message? The next day, another text came through. Gabby's text, "No service in Yosemite." But Gabby wasn't in Yosemite. She was in Wyoming. And then silence. No more calls. No more texts. Gabby had disappeared. While Gabby's family desperately tried to reach her, another disturbing event was unfolding in Wyoming. On August 27th, the same day her strange text was sent, a couple visiting the Merry Piglets, a small restaurant in Jackson Hole, witnessed something unsettling. Witness, Nina Angelo. We saw them arguing. He was being aggressive with the staff and Gabby was crying. She looked terrified, but she kept apologizing for him, like she was trying to smooth things over. Brian stormed in and out of the restaurant, waving his arms in frustration, before eventually leaving with Gabby. It was the last time anyone outside of Brian would see her alive. The next day, August 28th, another witness came forward. Miranda Baker, a traveler in Grand Teton, claimed she picked up Brian as a hitchhiker near Coulter Bay Village. He was alone. No sign of Gabby. Witness Miranda Baker. He was acting really strange. He said he had been camping alone for days, while Gabby stayed back at the van to work on social media. But something about it just didn't feel right. Brian asked to be dropped off near Jackson. But the moment Miranda mentioned she was headed toward Jackson Hole, his demeanor changed. He panicked. He abruptly asked to be let out of the car, saying he would find another ride. And then, just like that, he disappeared. By September 1st, Brian Laundrie was back home in Northport, Florida. He pulled into his parents' driveway in Gabby's white Ford Transit van, but Gabby wasn't with him. No announcements, no phone calls to her family, no concerned posts asking for help finding his fiancé. Nothing. Brian simply walked inside his parents' house, parked the van in their driveway, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Gabby's family didn't even know she was missing yet. They had been trying to reach her for days, growing more and more anxious with each passing hour. But when they reached out to Brian, he didn't answer. Instead, he and his family went silent. What Gabby's parents didn't know at the time was that Brian had returned home early. He had driven over 2,000 miles alone, in the very van that was supposed to carry them both on their dream adventure. And he hadn't told anyone. For 10 days, Brian stayed at home with his parents. No explanation, no public statement, just silence. Then, on September 11th, Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, officially reported her daughter missing. The investigation had begun, but Brian wasn't cooperating. When police arrived at the Laundrie home to ask questions, Brian refused to speak. Instead, his parents handed investigators the number for their lawyer. The message was clear: Brian wasn't talking. As the media picked up the case, the pressure mounted. Social media exploded with theories, and the world demanded answers. But Brian remained silent, hiding behind his parents, refusing to help. And then, just days later, he vanished. By mid-September, the search for Gabby Petito had become a national obsession. Social media exploded with hashtags, theories, and thousands of internet sleuths analyzing every detail of her disappearance. News outlets covered the case nonstop. But amid the growing pressure, one crucial person refused to speak: Brian Laundrie. On September 15th, Brian was officially named a person of interest. Yet he still didn't cooperate. He remained hidden inside his parents' house, shielded from the growing storm outside. Protesters gathered on their front lawn, chanting demands for answers. But the Laundries refused to open their doors. Then, just 2 days later, everything took a shocking turn. Brian was gone. On September 17th, Brian's parents told police that their son had left home 3 days earlier, on September 14th, and hadn't returned. They claimed he had gone to the Carlton Reserve, a vast and treacherous wildlife area in Florida. But here's where things get strange. If Brian had been missing since the 14th, why did his parents wait 3 days to report it? And why had they initially told investigators he was home the whole time? Now, there were two mysteries. Where was Gabby? And where was Brian? As authorities launched a full-scale manhunt for Brian, the search for Gabby had already led investigators to Wyoming, the last place she was seen alive. Days of searching through Grand Teton National Park yielded nothing, until September 19th. That afternoon, FBI agents discovered a body in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area, an isolated stretch of wilderness. The remains were consistent with Gabby's description. The nation held its breath as forensic teams worked to confirm what everyone feared. 2 days later, the results came in. The body was Gabby's. The autopsy report was chilling. Gabby had died by strangulation. The medical examiner estimated she had been dead for 3 to 4 weeks, meaning she had likely been killed shortly after the last known sightings in late August. The dream road trip had ended in a brutal, senseless murder. While Gabby's family grieved, one question remained unanswered. Where was Brian? As the FBI continued their search, the internet was on fire with speculation. Had Brian gone into hiding? Was he getting help? And most importantly, was he still alive? With Gabby Petito's murder confirmed, the manhunt for Brian Laundrie intensified. The FBI, local law enforcement, and even bounty hunters scoured Florida, searching for any sign of him. The Carlton Reserve, a sprawling 25,000-acre wetland known for its dense swamps and dangerous wildlife, became the primary focus. Helicopters, drones, K-9 units, and divers searched tirelessly. But despite weeks of effort, Brian seemed to have vanished without a trace. The public was outraged. How had he managed to slip away? Had his parents helped him? And was he even still in Florida? Or had he fled the country? For over a month, speculation ran wild. Tips flooded in, with alleged sightings of Brian reported everywhere from Canada to the Appalachian Trail. Online sleuths combed through every piece of evidence, hoping to crack the case. But then, on October 20th, the search took a grim turn. On the morning of October 20th, Brian's parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie, went to the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, a site adjacent to the Carlton Reserve. Within hours, authorities made a chilling discovery. Brian's belongings, including a backpack and a notebook, were found in an area that had previously been underwater due to heavy flooding. Nearby, human remains were discovered. The next day, forensic experts confirmed the remains belonged to Brian Laundrie. His cause of death? A self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The manhunt was over. Inside Brian's notebook, a confession was found. He admitted responsibility for Gabby's death, finally answering the question that had haunted the nation for weeks. But his death meant there would be no trial, no justice served in a court of law. Only unanswered questions and a grieving family left behind. Gabby Petito's case had gripped the world. It exposed the dark side of toxic relationships, the power of social media in solving crimes, and the painful reality of domestic violence. And while Brian's fate was sealed, the case left a lasting impact, one that would inspire change, demand awareness, and serve as a chilling reminder of how a dream road trip turned into a true crime tragedy. As the world mourned Gabby Petito's death, investigators and online sleuths revisited the chilling evidence she left behind, footage that unknowingly documented her own killer. From the moment Gabby and Brian began their cross-country trip, they captured nearly everything on camera. Gabby was building a social media presence, sharing carefully edited clips of their so-called van life adventure. Smiling selfies, scenic drives, playful moments. Everything seemed perfect. But behind the filters, a darker reality was hidden in plain sight. One of the most disturbing pieces of footage came from the police body cam recording in Moab, Utah, on August 12th. It showed Gabby crying uncontrollably, describing how Brian had grabbed her face and pushed her. But what most people didn't notice at first was Brian himself. Calm, joking, even smiling at times. His demeanor was chilling. He was already shifting the blame onto Gabby, making himself look like the victim. This was a classic tactic of an abuser: manipulation, deflection, control. Then there were Gabby's own Instagram and YouTube videos. In one post, her smile seemed strained, her body language tense. Online sleuths analyzed these clips frame by frame, noticing small but crucial details. The way she looked away from the camera when Brian spoke, how her once bright demeanor slowly faded as the trip went on. Gabby unknowingly filmed the man who would take her life. She documented the warning signs, the fear in her eyes, the control he had over her. And in the end, those videos became critical in exposing the truth. Gabby's story serves as a heartbreaking reminder of the warning signs of domestic abuse. If you or someone you know is in danger, seek help immediately. And if you want to see more eye-opening true crime cases, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. There are more stories that need to be told, and more victims who deserve justice.